Hey guys, welcome back to the Rhythm Section, brought to you, as always, by the Mind Refinery. I'm Kyle Bodanis. This week, Coburn and I talked to LA producer Jansport J. This guy has worked with everyone from Benny the Butcher and Freddie Gibbs to HitBoy and Snoop Dogg. We talk about growing up close to LA, the role of the album in today's music industry, and a bunch of other insight into what it takes to be a top-level producer in the game today. If you like what you hear, rate and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and if you have time, follow the Mind Refinery on social media. And now, here's the show. All right, team, this week we're joined by an immense West Coast talent. His production credits include work for Freddie Gibbs, Ab-Soul, and Snoop Dogg. This year he's dropped 3 albums and a beat tape. His latest work, Any Weather, is dope, and if you haven't heard it, please do so. It's really great. Please welcome Jansport J. Jay, thank you so much for being here.
Oh man, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
So how is everything going in LA right now?
Everything's good, man. Outside of this lockdown, it's a championship city right now, so
Oh, yeah.
everything.
Yeah, you guys are definitely killing it right now. And in fact, it's the that's how I want to start, is really talking about, the lockdown and everything. I mean, 2020 has been a pretty crazy, often dark year for everybody. But you've put out 3 albums and a beat tape. Was this because of the isolation, or was this the plan to always be putting out this amount of work?
Yes, it's a mix of both. I think within the past 2 years, I've kind of just increased my output in general. I just feel like that's the musical climate that we're in now, and so I just kind of had to find a way for me to put out a lot of work before it to feel like quality material. I kind of come from the album making generation, so with so many EPs and quick projects, you kind of have to keep up with the speed of music right now. But I still treat each project like a mini album. So that's really what it was about. And the lockdown really just kind of allowed everybody to zone in. And for the people that were already on that wave, we were kind of the ones that were really able to take advantage of it and just get to work.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like a lot of artists have kind of taken advantage of that, and you almost feel like sometimes, the writing in isolation almost creates like a different wavelength for the music. What has been inspiring you, lately? How do you get your inspiration during times like this?
Honestly, just a lot of it comes from within, just being a motivated, kind of ambitious creative. I have a personal almost addiction to just bodies of work. I always want to feel like I'm working on something or working towards something. So that's always helped. And, just kind of the musical climate right now. I'm blessed to be able to work with probably the hottest producer in the game right now, a HitBoy. So, when I get in the studio with him and hear everything that he's working on and I'm able to play what I'm doing, we just kind of, inspire each other, and iron sharpens iron. And so just stuff like that, and just the musical scene right now with cats like Griselda, and was able to be a part of Benny's album, and TDE as usual, Dreamville, just everything that's going on, just being able to contribute to music right now is really the inspiration. While the windows are open for me to do what I'm doing, just gotta keep the workflow high.
I mean, you've had like an incredible year. You've put out so much work, and I think your name's kind of ascending. And like your collaborations with HitBoy and being on the Benny album. Like, how's the reaction to that been? Have like a lot more people been kind of interested in you and kind of going back over your work since that album came out?
Yeah, for sure. I feel like I've kind of lived in this weird kind of musical purgatory where I think a lot of people were familiar with the name, and just me being around for so long, as far as just producing during the blog era, the late 2000s, like that first decade, and putting out instrumental albums, and just working with artists here and there. But within the past year, being able to collaborate with kind of higher profile artists, I think has brought a lot more attention to what I'm doing. And thankfully, I actually preferred it this way, to be able to kind of build a name and a career over time. And, when you do get that light, people have a back catalog to look at. And it doesn't feel like a flash in the pan moment. It feels like, this is something I've been working towards for a long time. And, the light is starting to shine my way. So, I've been prepared for it, and, just taking advantage of the looks that people are giving right now. So
Growing up in proximity to LA, like how does that affect how you dream as a kid and like what your ambitions are? Like, do you kind of look at, that you're in close proximity to an epicenter, so it's possible? Like, how does that affect your mentality and your ambition?
Yeah, well, growing up in Covina, we're 30 minutes outside of LA, and it's to people in LA, it's kind of it's I wouldn't say it's the boonies as far as like the IE that they consider the boonies, but we're definitely not in the center of LA. But for people in Covina, it's like LA is right there, and it's to me, it's nice to be able to go out there and work and run around, and to come back to a little bit of a slower pace than the hectic, downtown area. But I'd say growing up, it really wasn't a thing. It was just, especially when I had a family. My grandfather lived like in South Central, so LA was always there. So I never looked at the city as like, big dreams, hoping to make it out there. It's just like, that's the big city near us, and I guess things always felt possible. I never kind of came into the game with a small town mindset. If anything, um, with the cities being in proximity to LA, you think about Inglewood, you think about, like I said, South Central, um, Watts, all these different cities, and Covina is definitely on that. We're outside of all of that, but we just took great pride in where we were from, and we always had like a joke out here that, West Covina is the main city, and anytime you mention it to somebody from LA, they'll say that they have a cousin that lives out there or a girlfriend that they used to date or something like that. So people knew about the area, so we really just looked at it as an opportunity, as we're not specifically LA, but we're close to LA. People know about us, and this is, our opportunity to brand where we're from. So I take great pride in being from the Cove and the 626 area. So it's a mixed bag of, like I said, LA wasn't this far off, like, magical place, but at the same time, I just took a lot of pride in where I was from, and just always try to represent that.
Do you think like Hit Boy also from being from the IE, did you guys kind of connect over that of being like, in the shadow of LA, but like having your own styles and your own, gifts to bring the world?
Yeah, I think it just allowed a lot of people from our generation to embrace that, because we aren't all from, the the metropolitan city like that. You have Pasadena, you have San Bernardino, you have a lot of bigger cities that are outside of LA. So I think we were definitely able to relate on that. And then me and Hit, we I think we met on Twitter like 2011. We might have been MySpace friends before that, but we're like the same age range. So I think we've always known of each other and had respect for each other. I've known him since before the Kanye deal. So to see somebody, kind of come up in their career, and at the same time, he's been able to watch me do my thing, not necessarily within the mainstream industry, but just, independently and through the underground ranks, and to have a healthy respect for each other. And, the biggest thing with us is we've always kind of tapped in here and there over the years, and did work here and there, but it was really just about timing and synergy. When he moved over to Chalice, I want to say 2 or 3 years ago, I just started going there a lot, and we just started really building our chemistry out. And it's really a testament to, you can't put a square peg in a round hole. Things are going to happen when they're supposed to happen. So over us knowing each other 8 or 9 years, and the past 2 years for us to work as heavy as we have, it's just a testament of, alignment and timing, really.
What was the LA scene like? Because it's kind of, you were kind of came up at a weird spot, right? So you were, post the game success and pre Kendrick, and you also came up at a time when the music industry was kind of in turmoil. Sales were declining. There wasn't the sales were declining, but there wasn't that SoundCloud streaming infrastructure yet. Like, how did both those kind of situations inform your career and how your music developed?
It was important. It's beautiful looking back at it, because we learned how to not be so reliant on the internet. Like you were saying, I really kind of started out taking myself seriously 2008, 2009. I was interning at Interscope, so I'm there like in the middle of the music industry just crashing. I think we were pushing like Eminem's second, or not second album, but like his return album.
Yeah.
And people, we just didn't know how to sell music at that time. And you know, within the LA scene where I was producing, we had Pac Did, we had you and I, you had Blue, Don Kennedy. Um, we just kind of had like this resurgence of West Coast hip hop that wasn't necessarily the gangster rap that people were familiar with. I think at that time, you still had from that lineage, you had J Rock and you had Glasses Malone. You had a lot of artists like that, and we were just kind of the other side of. I would say we were like the lineage of Far Side, where it was like, we don't gangbang or anything like that, but we just like, fly chicks and fly sneakers and rapping and bikes and all that type of stuff.
Far it's funny because Farside has such an interesting place in LA, in LA lore and LA hip hop because like they drop Lab Cab in California, which I is one of my favorite hip hop albums of all time. They really drop it amidst that, with NWA happening and all that. Eventually Dre dropping his first album. Do you think that sound kind of got lost in the mix at that time?
I think it got lost around that time, but I think things also move in cycles, and you have to think people from that blog era, like I said, myself and Pac Div and Dom and even Kendrick, we all grew up like we listened to the Chronic and we listened to Lab Cabin. We kind of grew up with, you know, for me, it was like we listened to everything. It wasn't like a real hip hop thing. It's like my sister played NWA and we also played P Rock and CL Smooth. That's how we grew up. So like with the West Coast music, it was like we played Dre and we played Souls of Mischief.
So in that LA scene, post the game, kind of pre Kendrick in the blog era, when it was like you, Pac Div, like Blue and Exile, what was it like transitioning to the era we're in now, where we see like a lot of West Coast acts become successful and starting hitting the charts?
Yeah, I'd say the biggest thing is, so during that time period, we were also, you had the artists, like the ones that you named, and then you also had blog sites that were kind of rising at the same time, and clothing lines. We had, I want to say like Diamond and Supreme and all that stuff started coming up, and then you had Two Dope Boys, Easy Street, On Smash, all these different sites, even Hip Hop DX. And really it was just about, I think what we learned during that time period is once we had these blogs, we were able to have promotion as far as people were understanding who we were in our music and they were able to download the stuff for free. But then we had to figure out how to monetize it. And at that time, you weren't, we kind of take for granted today, you could just upload some shit and it'll be on Spotify or Apple Music. That was rocket science to us back then. And so I remember you and I being like the first group to get their CDs in Best Buy. And then, Kendrick sold like his EP on iTunes and stuff like that. Those are huge moments for us. And that's what we kind of learned, to early on, which is, something that this generation might struggle with. But it's like you could have all the notoriety in the world, but if you don't have, finances and stuff along with that, it's kind of like a moot point. And just kind of, give an example of that, we were able to see Kendrick early on. He was from the TDE camp, which at that time was kind of associated with a lot of the street labels. So they kind of just pressed up CDs and, just moved it hand to hand. They weren't really heavy with the internet presence. And so Kendrick was the first one I remember from that camp being smart enough to kind of dive into what we were doing as well with like the whole blog era and connecting with you and I and Pac Div and getting Murs on the song. And he was able to get those blog looks, but also have the mentality of TDE and all these, these legacy street rappers where it was like, you got to sell your CDs hand to hand. And that's where we were really able to kind of see things take off and kind of follow his lead with that.
Who was the first one you can remember being like super successful out of that blog era? Like I remember like watching like Dom Kennedy's come up, and Kendrick. Like who would you say like was the one that you were like, hey, this person's kind of like elevated the whole scene at that time?
It would depend on what you would call successful. I know the big moments for us. I know it was huge when Pac Div signed their deal with Universal Motown, and they had Mayor. That was a huge moment in the city. I remember we would go to South by Southwest doing the dances and stuff like that. I remember when Blue signed with Warner Sire, that was a big deal. When Dre shouted out Kendrick, that was a big deal. When Kendrick had the concert at the Key Club and Snoop and Game and all of them came out, there was a lot of moments during that era that was really important. But kind of going back to Pac Div, I feel like they were so important because they were kind of, all respect to them, like is like an incredible producer now. Mibbs is still working and Be Young as well. But they were kind of like the first casualty of, what the what we had to figure out what the industry was about. You have to keep in mind, like I said, we were blog era kids. We're just posting our music, trying to figure out how to monetize it. And they were among the first to get a record deal. So then it was like, okay, let's see how this works out. And when you sign with a record deal or a record company, especially around 2010, they're still in that ancient mindset of we need a hit. They're not recognizing the energy that you have in the city. They just want a hit record. And so you're chasing that hit record for 2 or 3 years and you're losing momentum on what you were building. And so we learned from them and from other artists at that time, okay, maybe signing the record deal isn't the greatest thing. Maybe you have to work it like Kendrick and TDE did, to where you become so undeniable that you could become like a partner with the label. And they just kind of leave you alone and do what you do. But it was important to see people like Pac Div just kind of jump out there and take some bullets for us and to learn like, okay, maybe that's not how we want to do it. So there was a lot of lessons learned in that era that I feel like our generation has, those that stuck it out and continue to make music. We're kind of, it's almost like we're just veterans at this. And, we just know how to continue to just put out our own stuff and do what we do.
So speaking of putting out your own stuff, I see like of all your success you've had on BandCamp, like how do you feel that platform compares to the DSPs and, to kind of put stuff out and be able to receive better income than like, your streaming percentages that are like 0.0 cents of a royalty?
Yeah, the streaming platforms is just goofy. Honestly, I throw stuff on there just to be accessible. I don't look to it for, financial income. Bandcamp for me is really for the fan, the Jansport J fan that wants to buy the vinyl, that wants to buy the digital, that wants to buy the hat, that wants to buy the poster. It feels like a real community over there. And I've been posting music on Bandcamp, I want to say since like 2012, 2011 maybe. So to watch that community like grow over the years, and it's always been very producer friendly and they're accessible. I've met with them a couple times. They always show love to the projects, and they do editorial write-ups and stuff like that. I just think it's important for any artist to kind of identify what works for them and to just continue to use that. And for me, Bandcamp has been super crucial in my career. I would say it was the best transition for me from the blog era into actually, okay, how do I monetize this? How do I make this a business for myself? Because I always kind of had the foresight of, one day we're not going to be on these blogs as heavy as we are. These blogs can just go away one day. The links could die. So how would anybody know that you were here? So that's when I kind of started trying to shift the mindset into building things on my own and having, physical product as well, because that doesn't disappear.
Especially with the kind of resurgence of vinyl too. You know what I mean? Like, it's funny. I think if you had asked anybody in the late 90s or early 2000s if the vinyl would have outlasted the CD, they'd be like, you're crazy. But now it's, for people who are looking for that physical, connection to the music, that seems to be the go-to.
Yeah, they just want physical things. I had to, I'm a little weird myself because I don't want to say I'm self-deprecating. It's just weird when something is so natural for you, like making music, to think that people really love it and they want the things that you put out. But it just comes down to that. Like a lot of fans, if I put out a vinyl, like, yes, I want a Jansport J vinyl. I'm a Jansport J fan. This is how I show that I'm a Jansport J fan. So it's a vinyl, it's a poster, it's, a t-shirt, it's stickers, it's tangible product. And I feel like, especially at this time, it's just good to kind of train your fans. I'm a fan of some of this shit being analog. Like I said, all this shit could disappear if we just leave everything on the internet. And I remember what it was like to go to buy the CD and to get the poster of my favorite MCs and stuff like that. And I still want to keep some of that alive, for the younger generation. So that's kind of what's worked for me personally.
Coburn, I'm interested in your thoughts on this too. So like when I was, growing up, I was all about, I need to get vinyl records, I need to get the CDs, I'm taking a paycheck, I'm liquidating that into records the whole fucking time. but I used streaming, like even like Napster, as kind of a way of previewing and then purchasing, because I mean at the late 90s or 2000s, part of the problem was I think that you'd have like two good songs on an album and that kind of threw people off. Like what was your relationship with streaming and things like Napster as you got older? And Coburn, I'd love to know your opinion as well.
Me personally, like my opinion on that, I would think like I was a nerd that wanted to buy the CD and look at the credits, and like you were saying, you do have I think there's just a different mentality with listening to music now. It's almost we have so much at our discretion that on the good side, you're open to hearing a lot of different things. Um, if I've never heard of an artist or whatever, I can just go and stream it real quick and like, oh, okay, cool, I actually like them. So that's on the positive side, but on the negative side, I don't think we listen to music long enough. We don't give things a chance. You know, back in the day, I might have bought a Reasonable Doubt, and the first listen that I might not have been crazy over it. And the more you listen to it, like I didn't like 22 twos that much at first. And the more you listen to it,
You're crazy.
yeah, but that's what happens when you sit with music. Like the
Yeah.
longer you listen to that. I could say with I mean that was a made up example, but like a real example would be the Black album. Like, I'm not a fan of Eminem beats. So when you hear Moment of Clarity and stuff, I'm just like, like I can't stand this shit. But then when you listen to what Jay is saying, actually this is hard and now this makes sense and the beat isn't overpowering him. If I heard Black Album for the first time on streaming, maybe I'm just like making a new playlist and I'm leaving that song out anymore. So I think it's important for, obviously you can't put that shit back in the bottle. But I feel like it's important to at least have that as an option to kind of just like sit and listen with music again and to live with it.
Yeah, I think like there's good things about streaming, but I think there's also like the kind of playlistization of everything where there's a lot of artists who aren't making full albums anymore, or they're just making singles and they're making music to live on playlists. And I think you're training listeners to listen to music in a way that I think hurts artists, because I think if you're a full and complete artist, you want to put an album out and you're taking time to put thought into sequencing the album. You're taking time to think about all the beats and how this flows, and how like a 40-minute or an hour and a 5-minute listen like goes. So when you kind of start adding everything to streaming playlists and stuff like that, you're pulling apart the music and you're ruining cohesiveness. And I think the way that people listen to music now isn't with the artist's intentions in mind as much. It's more, oh, I like this song, I like this mood, let me just take this and put it with something else. And I think it kind of ruins something about listening to an album.
Yeah, and I to just add to that, I don't think anybody from this generation is gonna grow up and say like, man, like with all due respect, that Rap Caviar playlist from November 27th, man, that shit raised me. Like that was,
Yeah.
Yeah.
how you connect with. But somebody's gonna hear this Benny the Butcher album, or they're gonna hear, Good Kid, Mad City. Like these are important moments in their life. So it's just, it's a weird time. Like you said, like people are making music for playlists, and I can't knock it, but that's not what I'm cut from. That's not. There's a bigger purpose to me with this music thing.
That's one thing Coburn and I talk about a lot too, is there's kind of your feeling with, I mean, even guys like 21 Savage doing a whole album with Metro Boomin, you know what I mean? It's kind of like you're seeing a resurgence of the album a bit, because you're getting all these like producer artist combinations where they're deciding to stick together for a full, I mean, you see this with Freddie Gibbs, especially working with like Alchemist and Madlib, where it's like they get together in a room and they come up with this like landscape and they put it out, and it's a whole album from beginning to end. And I think I think that's only better for music. Like, where do you think the album as an art form is right now?
It's funny that you say that, because I talk about that in the studio with HitBoy a lot. We kind of say we're giving them what people don't know that they still want. You're so caught up in these playlists, but like you say, even if you take away, because it's easy to say, okay, cool, Freddie and Madlib and just all these, kind of expected, like, I hate the term real hip hop, but what somebody would call real hip hop shit, like, okay, cool, that's expected. But like you said, Metro Boomin and 21 Savage, like that's dope because it's cohesive and he's giving them like a world to live in. And I think that shit is important. So I think for as much as these labels are trying to get rid of the album format, because that's exactly what they're trying to do, because it just makes more sense for them to be single based. It's less risk, it's less, money. You can kind of focus all your efforts and resources into one thing. Like it's easier to do it that way, but that's not how music works. People aren't going to know that they missed the album until they get incredible albums, until you get the 21 Savage or Metro Boomin, you get Benny, you get the new Nas album. These are moments that, just looking at social media, like you'll see people like certain songs and projects here and there, but when an album comes out that really shifts the culture, you have those moments all over again where it's like people didn't know that they were missing that feeling. And I don't think that's honestly ever gonna, go away. It might be a lot less frequent, but I think you're always gonna have to come back to giving an artist a world to live in and, letting them tell their story.
Yeah, I think you're right on that. Like, I think like you could still see it through social media when an album connects, and that is something that you can't replicate with a singles base or with an album that doesn't measure up. Because I think the albums that aren't made with intention, you don't get those moments of everybody talking about that album front to back because there's no front to back on it. They're like, oh, I like these 3 songs on it, and then we'll never discuss the album again. But the albums that you connect with, that you're playing like, A Good Kid, or, like even those mixtapes era, like when you talk about Pac Div, like Church League Champs, like I'm still listening to Church League Champs, and that, like, I think Pac Div were ahead of their time. And I think, certain people connect on a crazy level like that.
Cool Kids, all those people from that era. Like you have to think you love these artists because of their products. You love Dom Kennedy because of From the West Side with Love and Yellow Album.
Yeah.
You love Blue because of
Blow the Heavens.
like these are every artist that you love, damn near you could tie to an album. Like when you so to me that's always going to be important.
I think it's like the real music, only real music gonna last, right? Like that quote, and I think that like it's forever truth. So if you could pick, I think I know a few artists that you've kind of done this with, but if you could pick some artists that you haven't worked with to do a Jansport J and this artist an album together, who would you pick right now?
Oh man. Honestly, I find a lot of like just excitement in working with like new talent, Um I'm blanking right now, but I definitely want to do some more R&B stuff. Um, Me and Stally work. I love to keep doing that with Stally. Me and Benny chop it up. I love to work with him some more. Anybody really. I think it's not so much. I think when I was younger, I had my list of like. Now I love to work with Lupe Fiasco. I love to do like a 10-track joint off Lupe. But it used to be like, Lupe and Ghostface and wanting to just have specific people. But now it's more so the challenge of, whoever approaches, what could I give them? Like, where could they, push me and stretch me? What do I hear for them? So it's more so that than like, pinpointing, I want to work with this person on the project. So, Smoke Diz is somebody, me and Dom Kennedy, we have a lot of records. I'm trying to push him to do a project. But I think we're going to do something else with him. But, whoever really wants to work, honestly.
How do you balance, when you're working with an artist, your style versus their style? Like, how much is it, like, are you looking for someone with a specific sound? Are they looking for someone with a specific sound? How does that work in terms of, like, establishing chemistry?
I come from a background of, like, when I was interning at Interscope, I wanted to be an A&R. So I still have that spirit. And I think most producers kind of have the spirit anyways of just, like, listening and just kind of understanding where an artist is coming from and their trajectory and what they could do and their potential. And so that always is kind of exciting to me. It's definitely a balance of, it's really a process. And I could just kind of walk you through it. Is
Absolutely.
Somebody approaching saying that they want to work. If it's intriguing to me, a lot of times it'll just make sense. If Stally wants to work, yeah, that makes sense. We make similar music. There was an artist that I worked with in the past named El Prez, who we did a project together, but I was so fascinated by that because he has a super deep LA accent and I have these soul sounding beats. So to me, that was like, okay, what would that sound like? Like, what kind of world do I want to create for him that he's still going to be inspired by, he could still write to, but still sounds like me. Like it's got to be a little bit out of my zone, but still sound like me. And so sometimes just that challenge, sometimes with that specific situation, he said the title of the album, and I knew exactly what it sounded like. He said Urban Street Americana. And I was like, oh, that sounds like industrial, soulful 70s type shit. I know exactly, I'm going to start creating that, you know? So it's really just about, I think the most important thing for me is almost like a method acting, just throwing yourself completely into the idea of working with somebody. So it's like whatever that person requires. For me and Stally, it was like we're gonna work together and we're gonna talk on the phone for 2 hours every other day, just about music, about life. I'm gonna figure out who you are, what you like, what you don't like. You're gonna learn that about me. I'm gonna figure out, okay, like this is what the industry has done for you, and this is what you hate about it. You would probably like to rap about some shit like this. Maybe I can give you production that's a little emotional that will allow you to get these things off your chest. It's really about being intuitive. And to me, it's important to be able to, that's just old school producing to me. That's what I learned from a Ninth Wonder, a Pete Rock, a Premier. It's just like how to produce artists in that fashion.
Well, it's interesting because you kind of allude to a personal relationship that's needed to establish where you have to understand them as a human being. And I feel like all the best producers do that, from like Rick Rubin, all the way to someone like Metro Boomin, where they have to really understand, like with Metro Boomin with 21 Savage, is about understanding this, looking at things through like a cinematic or horror lens, and understanding, where he's coming from with that. So it's really interesting that you say that, because it's kind of like the through line for good production.
Right, 100%.
Where do you think the industry is now? I mean, we had talked about when you were coming up, you were kind of in this weird gray area. Like, where for you, what is the health of the industry now? What are some of the bad things, some of the good things? Like, tell us what your thoughts are.
I think it's healthy in the sense that there are so many lanes open that I have the personal standpoint that you really, unless you're locked into a crazy deal before where we're at right now, you really can't play the victim, because there's so many avenues for you to just make a way for yourself. So I think it's healthy that we have, if you want to be a playlist artist, and there's a lot of people that do well at that, make music for playlists, you can do that. If you want to do license and sync, you can do that. If you want to sell your music on BandCamp, you can do that. If you want to be a specialized artist that sells your album like Mad Homie for like $500 and sell your vinyl for 1,000, you can do that. So I think it's healthy, and that the internet has really opened up all the lanes to just make a success out of yourself. I think what's a little unhealthy is just the specific lane of, I would say mainstream music industry, as far as just the way producers are still treated, the contracts that these people kind of come up with, the fact that you can make like fractions of a cent on a record, like just all that. Me and my manager kind of laugh at this shit, because when we do like the official placements and we look at the paperwork and all that, it's just so goofy to me, because you're telling me, oh, I'm gonna
the points, like the point system, I think is so flawed in that way.
Oh, just give me my advance, give me my fee, and make sure the back end is fair. But I'm not waiting on the payday with the back end, because it's so fucked right now. And that's why I'm just, even working with some artists, I'm like, oh, like low key, I'm doing just as well on BandCamp than you are within the label system. And you have all the press in the world and all the notoriety and all the fans, the following, social media following. So I'd say what's, kind of predatory still is just some of these music industry contracts and the way that they're actually doing it. But that's why my personal approach is to have all these different lanes. Say, okay, I can go play the music industry game. I can go get a co-production with HitBoy, but that's not my bread and butter. My bread and butter is Jansport J and my beat tapes and my merchandise, and that's just another stream of revenue. So I'm not sitting here crying victim over, an industry that's predatory, but it's like, look, there's money for me over here too, but I'm not dependent on that. So it's really just about kind of, adapting to what's going on.
How was your touring? Like, I know you're probably missing it now, but how'd you find that experience, like going on the road?
Yeah, it's inspiring for me. We just kind of got into the mindset of, we just had to go out. A lot of times it's self-funded, just go somewhere for the first time. And just make some connects and touch the ground. And right before the pandemic, I went to. It was a crazy week. I We were working on the Nas album, and I had a joint on there, but the sample didn't clear. But we were working on the Nas album, and so that was going to come out Valentine's Day at first as a surprise album, and then I was going to Japan that week, flying out on my birthday, which was the 19th, to do my first Japanese tour. Um, so we did that for about 2 weeks and had my first sold out shows and stuff like that. And it's important to, especially within the States. I'm sure Canada's a little similar to in Toronto scene. But when you, especially in a major city like LA, it's very easy to feel like you're just another pawn in the industry. You kind of go to a show, the crowd is full of rappers and producers who work just like you. You don't feel like you're doing anything extravagant. You're in the game, but you don't feel like you're making real impact until you go out of these places. Until you go to Madrid, Spain, or you go to Tokyo, and you just realize you have real fans here that you never would have known about. So touring for me was super inspirational. It gave me my second win. A lot of that is what I came back home with and was ready to work, and some of the placements started happening. But for me, it's important to go out and see the world and get some inspiration and throw it right back into what we're doing. So,
how do you think the COVID situation is going to, change that when we're coming back? Like I feel like it could pick up and be the way it was, but it just feels like everything, like the paradigm is kind of changed. You know what I mean?
yeah, I just don't know if things will ever be like it was. Um, I'm sure things will get better. It reminds me of the States when we had 9/11 and how we did, how we traveled and how the world was before that, and then what happened after 9/11. We were fine. We rebounded, but certain things aren't the same. I can't just go to the gate and wait for my loved one to get off the flight. There's certain things that the world is different, and I think that's what COVID is doing right now. Um, but I really can't call it. I don't know what's going to happen, but it's important to just be able to adapt and to be ready for whatever comes. I'm still, as soon as things open up some more, just gonna kind of get out there just to get that inspiration, because just as much as performing was important, it's important for me to just tap in with a different culture and get to know some people and collaborate with artists out there and kind of open up your creative process. But who knows? I hope things kind of get back to somewhat normal where we could safely go out there performing. I miss DJing a lot. I do a lot of beat sets, but I really do miss DJing, because DJing for me kind of gave me it was like a day off from the intense, like feeling like I had to make something, and I just kind of vibed out and, provided, just a good feeling for people. And a lot of times I would hear certain parts of records I wasn't even listening to. And then I can kind of go back and, sample or get inspired from it when I go back home.
Do you ever find like you get kind of stuck into like a rut producing, or like it's hard to like kind of like find new ideas or fresh ideas?
Yeah, definitely. It's a cyclical thing. You just have to know. You just got to put one foot in front of the other. And what's important for producers to know is that it's not always about opening the beat machine and making the beats. Those days when you're not feeling it creatively, there's administrative stuff you can do. You could be registering your songs, which a lot of producers aren't doing. You could be sending emails. You could be sending out beat packs from old stuff. And sometimes you could just be sitting and listening through old albums and studying. I kind of, especially when I get into an album mode, I just like studying my favorite albums and not so much mimicking what they did, but understanding what they did and why they did it. So like an example of that, before I think I did my Low album, I was listening to Midnight Marauders a lot. And
such a good
if
album.
I'm not mistaken, I realized that most of that album is between 91 and 94 BPM. And like a lot of the classic 90s albums are between that BPM range. So I'm like, okay, let me start just doing what I do now, but let me see if I can get this same kind of feel. These like intrinsic things that maybe the fans not tapping into, but it's a part of, what we're attached to with classic albums. So there's a lot of things that you could do outside of just the making beats every day is when you're in, those creative ruts.
How do you find it to I think like watching the industry, you see production styles kind of come in trend and come in vogue and then go away. Like you watch someone like Lex Luger, whose sound, becomes the sound of hip hop for a little bit, and then he's not hot anymore. So then people cool off on him, and then somebody else kind of becomes that sound. So how do you find that like you avoid, falling into trends or keeping your style, kind of open?
That's been the biggest blessing for me. Producing as long as I have, I've kind of gone through the eras where people told me, back in 2008, 2009, you need to make some of the 80s sounding cool kids type stuff. And then, 2011, you need to make dubstep. 2013, you need to make trap. I've always just kind of made what felt good to me. Like I'm soul sample based, but if I want to do some other shit, I'm gonna do some other shit. And it's really about not chasing the trend. And the way it's worked for me is, when you're consistent for so long with a sound and people can kind of figure out who you are without being boring, but just like that's a Ninth Wonder sound, that's a Jansport J sound, that's a Neptune sound. When you build that for yourself, people kind of come to you for it. And so that's when me and HitBoy really started locking in again, where it was like he was just on his rapping shit. He wanted to get his raps off. And when you want to do that, you got to come back to some boom bap, some soul, some, that type of stuff that pulls it out of you. And so he was able to tap in with me because he knew that's where I was at. That's where I've been at since he knew me. And now, ironically, when the music industry comes back to that, and you have Griselda and you have all these people that are just rapping again, it's like, all right, well, we got to tap in with Jansport J because that's what he's been doing. So it's really kind of worked out for me, kind of sticking to my guns.
I think that's amazing. I also wonder too, like you mentioned that Nas track that you worked on that didn't make the album because of sample clearances. Have you had any other like big songs knock it out there because of sample clearances?
Not because of sample clearances, but this is another song for on HitBoy's album, Young and Black. That's when he actually sent to Jay-Z, and Jay-Z wanted it, and I just don't think he ever got around to it, so he just used it on his project. But there's a lot of almost placements that have happened, which we kind of laugh about now when it comes to me sending out packs to certain rappers. I tell me and my manager laugh about it. I said, "Oh, I've had Nas and Jay-Z songs fall through, so nothing can really happen."
Phase you after that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't feel like I'm missing out on anything. It's like when things are aligned, it's gonna work out. These people know who I am, so it is what it is. But there was a game record as well that we did for his last album that didn't make it. There was a Yo Gotti song that me and HitBoy did that didn't get cleared because of the sample. So that's part of the game that you play, especially when you sample a lot. Some of these people are going to clear. Some of them want to charge crazy amounts. But I've also kind of adapted to the sample pack game as far as just finding sample packs and producers that have a sound that makes sense for me, and to still make it soulful and to feel like it's an actual sample. So.
First of all, I've really spent the last few days, kind of diving into your discography. Contemporary instrumental albums tend to gravitate towards luminaries like, Jay Dilla and Pete Rock, but you've been able to stay away from like getting into like fully into those sounds and being trapped within them, and like really kind of adding, a level of originality to it. Like, how do you keep fresh? Like, how do you, keep the ideas flowing so you're not like just retreading old ground?
That's a great question. Honestly, I feel like just being it's like kinetic energy, like if you just stay moving, object, what is that from fucking science? That's an object that's in motion will stay in motion. You know what I mean? Like if you just continue to work, ideas will continue to come. So I just try to continue to work and just, whenever there's an idea, I just run towards it. I try not to let it fester. I really try not to overthink things. I just kind of dive into it, make it what it is, and just, either put it out, or sometimes it's like, all right, I'm not even putting this out, but I just needed to flesh out that idea to see what it was. And I was just going to sit over here. Maybe in the future, it'll make sense just to put out. But I believe in being obedient to your just creative urges, your ideas, and just running after it and not thinking too much about it. And, I I'd say, and I take that as a compliment as far as, not sounding exactly like Dilla and Pete Rock, because that really just kind of comes over time. People know I started making instrumental albums because I heard Donuts. I didn't know you could do something like that.
And that's kind of what I was referring to, because I feel like after post Donut, when you heard instrumental hip hop, that's what was the trying to be, try to emulate.
That's the Bible. And I know DJ Shadow had done stuff before and Pete Rock and everything, but for me personally, I bought Donuts the day that he died. And I just didn't know a project could have, like, I was listening to it like it was an album and there was no rap. And I felt seen because, at my core, I've always wanted to make bodies of work, but I was a producer, which at that time, you got to remember the instrumental album wasn't so popular. So I always had this thing where I'm starting to make beats, I'm starting to take myself seriously, but you're kind of at the, you're at the mercy of artists of, if they're vibing with these 3 or 4 beats, they're not exactly going to do it the way that you see it, the way you envision it. So you kind of just have to, chop it up to the game. But once I realized and listened to Donuts, it was like, oh, I can make my own body. I could just be selfish and say, this is what I want an album to sound like. This is the journey I want to take somebody on. And so, yeah, Donuts was super important for that. And over time is where you really kind of just find your own sound and find out who you are. Because anybody, when you're starting out producing, you're gonna sound like your favorites. I was a Ninth Wonder clone when I started out, and I was a Neptune's clone, and I was a Dilla clone at one point, and then you start to find your own sound and just build it out.
So did switching from Fruity Loops to Machine like help you like switch your sound up a bit?
1,000%. It allowed me to feel a lot more organic. FL Studio is a great program. For me, when I was using it, everything is super intentional. So if you want the kick to hit here, you got to click it to that point on the grid. If you want the snare to hit, it's super intentional without really having experimentation. Once I got the machine, if my snare was a little bit late, it's like, wait a minute, like, let me listen to that. That actually sounds kind of dope. Oh, okay, well, now I could just put this chop over. It was a lot more opening up to my creative process. So I think as soon as I switched the machine, my imagination grew a lot more, and I was able to kind of make a lot of happy mistakes and mess around with plugins. A lot of things that kind of became my sound. I did it on accident one day and thought, oh, that sounds dope. Actually, okay, cool. I'm going to incorporate that into what I do. So, Machine was like the perfect graduation for me because I'm a creature of habit. People try to get me onto the MPC, onto Reason, to a lot of different programs, and I just didn't take to it. But Machine, I was able to sit with it for about a week, and it was a good transition from FL Studio because I could still kind of look at a grid, but I had an actual drum pad to do things organically.
So when you and HitBoy are working, are you guys both on Machine or is he on Fruity Loops?
He's on FL Studio.
He's on FL Studio still.
And yeah, we work a couple different ways. Sometimes I'll come to the studio. He might just have a drum beat going, and I'll pull up a sample and chop it up and put it on top of the drums he has. Sometimes he has a sample chop that he's trying to figure out the drums, and I'll just, plug my machine up to the aux and try out some drum sounds. If we get something we like, export it over, and then we start doing it together. There's been a lot of times where I just send him beats and he might fuck with and say, send me the stems, and he'll take the drums out and redo the drums or re-chop the sample. It's free flowing. It really comes from a place of trust because we've just known each other for so long, and we root for each other. So it's not a competition thing. It's just like, yo, let's make the dopest music possible. The important thing about me and him and a lot of producers in our circle, G Rye and Chasing Cash and G Dave, we come from that time period where we grew up listening to Blueprint, and we listened to Jurassic 5 Quality Control, and we listened to Illmatic and Stillmatic. And so we grew up with the album, kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier. Those were our moments. And so now that we're kind of in our own lanes, kind of driving where the culture is at, we have the opportunity to bring that back into the game. And that's something that me and him talk about a lot. And I'm so happy that he's at the forefront of what's going on, because that's the pedigree he comes from. He will out rap, and he's really ahead. He listens to a lot of stuff that we grew up on, and he's like incorporating that into the music now. That's why Benny's album. We sat in that studio. I said, "No, this feels like '98 to '02 Hope to me. It sounds like Hard Knock Life 2. It sounds like Blueprint 2. It's all that infused in the music." And he was able to do that because that's where we come from, and that's where he knew he could bring Benny to. And that's where Benny was at in his career. So
Listen to your discography, and I really enjoy it. Especially, I'm very much into instrumental hip hop. It's good, but I feel like when you get to Pharaoh, it's like it's an inflection point, and you just go, and it the music becomes even more original, and it like I feel like that, like around that time it's almost like there's some experimentation happening, because it really kind of changes the road for you from a music point of view.
yeah, that's a great observation. I think Pharaoh around that time period is when I really started stepping into my own and looking at what I was doing and the legacy that I wanted to leave. And just realizing that I actually it's like I said, it's a weird thing to feel like you have any kind of impact or that you're doing something of merit. But around that time, I started to really, I'm a very humble person. And at that time, I had to kind of take, I had to take in some of my flowers and be like, no, you're doing dope shit, and it's time for you to have a moment. And that one was super organic because I went to, I'm weird. I love um, snow and cold weather. I'm from LA, but I just love cold weather. I love Toronto and that cold up there. But
Yeah, we got lots of that.
yeah. So I was mad my last trip. It didn't snow at all. It was cold as shit, but it didn't snow. But I went to I was in Brooklyn. I love New York, and I was in my first real blizzard, and we got snowed in. And I was like, damn, I want to make an album that feels like this. And then at the same time, I'm kind of weird. I could see certain pictures and just get inspired by it. And I saw this old school picture of Rakim and Eric B. And the way Rakim was looking at the camera, it was like, to me, Rakim has a super quiet confidence that I identify with, but he still exudes like, I'm the shit. Like, I'm me, I'm Rakim. And that's kind of what I aspire to have myself, where it's like, I'm humble on me, but I am who I am. So it was really about like, how do I make an album that just captures this feeling? And I was able to just stay in that mindset for, however long I was working on that shit. It was a minute, but the first beat I made from that album was Huh Okay. And that's when it was like, it felt like Rakim and Gritty Snow. And I was like, this is what I have to follow and kind of, stay in this world. So Pharaoh was very important. And for me to do that and for it to get the reception that it got, that was when I really started kind of going in that direction of just making albums in that way. And that was the one that Pitchfork got the look. And I still haven't read that Pitchfork article because I can't read my own press. But
I would too. I really would, because like, first of all, I was like, because I was going through your albums, I'm like, yo, Pitchfork gave this a 7.6. I'm like, these guys are the snobbiest mofos in the fucking world, and so I'm like, this album must be good. And then yeah, man, it was really 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 good.
yeah, it's dope. But I have a thing, and maybe I'll go back and read it one day. But I learned very early on, two dope boys did a beat battle like in 2008, and I was one of the producers that they picked. And I think I might have had like a record that had Blue and Dom Kennedy and Polyester. So for the first time, I was feeling myself a little bit. And we did this beat battle, and I got trashed in it. And I remember reading the comments, and people were just acting like I was, I thought he had potential. He went to this beat battle. The beat is so shit and blah, blah, blah. And that's when I realized that I was like, oh, on the internet, they're either going to praise you too much or they're going to shit on you too much. There's no middle ground. So as much as I can, just kind of stay away from that noise and work. It's not about reading any of that. So I try to stick to that. But one day I'm gonna have to go back and read that article.
I mean, like, LeBron James gets shit, so like, from mostly me and Coburn. But but you know what I mean? Like, it's funny because athletes say it. It's like everyone's gonna. There's a bunch of people who are gonna say bad things about you, and there's a bunch of people who are gonna say good things about you, and you kind of just have to not believe any of it and do your shit.
Yeah, you have to know your own temperament too. I know I have thick skin, and also at the same time, I just don't need that energy. Overly, being overly praised or overly criticized. I just don't need either one to do what I do because the motivation is within. So that's just kind of where I try to stay with it, really.
So is Jansport J an official member of Surf Club?
No, those are the homies though. Those are that's like family. But you would think so at this point, but no, we just it's a special energy right now. I'll say that much. I tell HitBoy all the time that that room over at Chalice is I've personally had so many just like life changing important moments in there that I'm gonna remember forever. You know, I sat in there and listened to an album with Nas. I sat in there during the Racks in the Middle sessions with Nipsey Hussle. There's just been a lot of shit that's happened in that room, and there's so much good energy in there with the Surf Club members, with Big Sean being in there a lot. With it feels, and I want him to do it. I want him to shoot that shit like Fade to Black because there's so much shit happening over there, to where you could walk in that room and one day it might be Benny the Butcher or the most super rap guy you can think of, and the next day it's like Gucci Mane or somebody like that. Like his versatility is so crazy that anybody can be in that studio any day, and it's just a very special time. So I just try to stay locked in with him as much as possible.
So, to wrap things up, what's next for you? Like, what is the plan? What is the next step in your career?
To continue to do what I'm doing. I definitely want to increase, what I'm doing on a merchandise level. Give my fans a lot more just product, and there's a lot of people that are happy for me right now. And I want them to have the things that I had when I was listening to Ninth Wonder and Dilla, just these merchandise and product pieces. So I'm definitely gonna do a lot more of that. I'm looking to just take this light and this torch I have and to try and do some different things, produce internationally. I want to take this soul sound global. Continue to work with HitBoy, continue to work with people like Don Cannon, who's been showing a lot of love, and the Benny the Butchers, and just whoever's ready to work. I'm just kind of looking at the door opening for me right now, and me having an opportunity to push music in a certain direction. So just staying locked in and working harder than ever at this moment. That's what is really about. Once you get the light and some of the the notoriety is when you really got to go hard. And thankfully, I've been ready for it. So there's been a lot of people asking for beat packs. I've been sending them out, but also just staying hungry and just continuing to work. So.
Is there any other records we can expect to hear you on? Like other than like we heard you on Dom Kennedy, you just put out the album with Stally. Is there anything else we should be looking for like this year or early next year?
I think Benny the Butcher's artist Haim is coming out with the album that I'm on. So I got another record with Benny and his guys. Me and HitBoy always working. So I think they're doing like another $500,000 project. That's like home base. So me, Dom, and HitBoy are always working. Me and Quentin Miller are locked in working. So just a lot more stuff like that, and sending packs out to some well-known artists that hopefully they pick up on something. But yeah, just trying to stay locked in really.
Anything to plug before we head out?
JansportJmusic.com. That's got the beat tapes, the solo discography. AllAttractionNoChasing.com is my merchandise home, so there'll be more music there. And yeah, just shout out to everybody that's been supporting. Shout out to you guys for having me. I love Toronto, my favorite city. Shout out to you guys.
Yeah, make sure you go visit the BandCamp and pick up a trucker hat or something.
Sir, definitely.
Jay, thank you so much for doing this.
Appreciate you guys having me. Thank you.
All right, guys, we'll talk to you soon.